And it's not just about price. Price is often one of the more important sticking points. Because again, it is one of the biggest factors. And they say in real estate, all the money is made at the buy, right? So that price that you purchase at is extremely important. However, there's a ton of other factors that play into that deal in getting to that ultimate finish line, right? It's talking about timing, contingencies, the market dynamics, like what each party wants in that deal. There's a lot of other factors that play into it, and you need to have a firm grasp and understanding of that. It's not enough for you to just say, oh. Welcome to the Home Goals Podcast, the ultimate guide for turning your home goals into a reality. I'm your host, Derek Thornton. Join us as we navigate the twists and turns of obtaining a home. We'll be offering expert tips, helping you avoid pitfalls, and championing your journey towards that cherished place to call home. In this week's episode, we'll be discussing leverage and how to use that in real estate negotiations, right? Any negotiation you're dealing with, whether it's in real estate or any other facet of life, you're always going to be looking at how you can use leverage to your advantage, right? What are the advantages that you have? What are you looking to get out of the deal? What is the other party looking to get from this deal? And how you can figure out a way to make it work for both sides. And get that working in there, right? There's always going to be some leverage that changes and shifts. Is not going to remain static throughout the entire transaction or throughout the entire deal. It usually shifts and changes, and you're going to be looking up on context clues, hints, anything that you can find to figure out how you can get the upper hand in those negotiations and make sure that you're always making decisions that work out in your favor in that deal or in that situation. Again, it's at the core of every single real estate negotiation I've ever done. You want to have an accurate knowledge of the market, accurate knowledge of that seller, and as much information as you can possibly find out about where they stand in the situation and how you can get things to work out in your favor that gets them to go along there with you, right? Again, you're trying to get this deal to work out. At the end of the day, both the buyer and the seller want the same thing, right? They want that house to get sold to that person, right? The end goal is the same. How you get there can be different, right? Sometimes it can be a very agreeable terms. Sometimes it can be a fist fight all the way down to the end, but it changes in many circumstances. And so, again, you're both trying to reach the same finish line. It's just figuring out how you can get there in a way that's advantageous to you. And so we'll discuss things that you want to be looking at as a buyer, as well as what the seller is likely going to be looking at and how that factors into the demands or the requests that you're going to be making throughout the course of a real estate deal or transaction. And it's not just about price. Price is often one of the more important sticking points. Because again, it is one of the biggest factors. And they say in real estate, all the money is made at the buy, right? So that price that you purchase at is extremely important. However, there's a ton of other factors that play into that deal in getting to that ultimate finish line, right? It's talking about timing, contingencies, the market dynamics, like what each party wants in that deal. There's a lot of other factors that play into it, and you need to have a firm grasp and understanding of that. It's not enough for you to just say, oh, I'll let my agent handle that, because at the end of the day, your agent, while they have your best interests at need, they aren't going to be the ones that are living in this house. They're not going to be the ones that are going to be here from day to day making that mortgage payment. That's not going to be on them. That's all on you. And so while you should use your agent as a resource and as a consultant to help you guide you through that deal, the decision ultimately lies in your hands. And so you want to make sure that you as well have a pretty clear understanding of where things stand and why you're making the decisions that you're making, right? I always tell my clients, I never want you to just do something simply because I told you to. You need to have an understanding of why we're doing this or why we're responding in this way and how that's going to impact the deal and ultimately impact this negotiation. Now, in North Carolina, we have a very unique feature in our offer that is not available in many states. We have what's called a due diligence fee. Now, there's a lot of states that may have heard of due diligence where it's like, oh, this is a period of time for you to investigate the property and everything like that. But what makes North Carolina unique is that we have a fee attached to that period. Most states, they will allow you to do the inspections and everything like that, and then kind of decide whether or not you want to move forward on that house. And if you decide not to, you can usually back out without any penalty or loss of money. In North Carolina, we have a fee that is attached to that period called the due diligence fee, where the buyer is giving the seller funds directly to them, made out to the buyer and the seller. Made out to the buyer and seller, made out to the seller, and gives them the ability to spend that money however they want. It's a non-refundable fee that you're giving to that seller once that deal goes under contract, and saying, hey, these are funds that I'm giving up to have a due diligence period to really inspect this property and see if it's something I want to pursue. And you're giving those funds to the seller as a way of saying, hey, I'm serious about staying in this deal. I'm not intentionally wasting your time. Here's some money to let you know how serious I am. There's no cap or floor on that due diligence fee. It can be as high or as low as both parties agree for it to be. It could be zero. I don't know why a seller would ever do that or agree to do that, but there's nothing to stop you from making it zero, and there's nothing to stop you from making it the full price of the house if you can afford to do that, right? There's no cap or floor on that due diligence fee. Now, one important thing to note too is that it does benefit you on the back end if the deal closes. So the way I always explain it to buyers is that if the deal closes successfully, it's a deposit. If you back out of the deal for any reason, whether you wanted to or not, whether you could get financing or not, whether there was issues with the repair, whether you got cold feet, for any reason, whether it was your fault or not, if that deal falls apart, that due diligence fee stays with the seller, and they get to keep those funds and move on to find the next buyer. And so there is a high level of risk involved, but it's not all risk, right? There is some benefit to you if that deal closes. The due diligence fee is one of the best ways for the seller to determine or hold some leverage in the deal with that buyer, right? In many other states, the seller's kind of at the mercy of the buyer while they're under contract. They're just hoping and praying that that buyer doesn't back out of the deal. In North Carolina, that due diligence fee lets us know the likelihood that this person is willing to stay in the deal or back out, right? They offer $500, right? Let's say they have 20 grand that they can use to kind of for the sale of this or purchase of a home, and they're willing to give up $500 in due diligence to get this house under contract. Odds are they're usually not. $500 stings, right? Like it would hurt if you lost it, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be devastating to the point where you're going to have to start over from scratch, right? And so that's what the due diligence fees were typically at when they first came into existence in North Carolina in 2011. Now, over the years, they slowly started to creep up, right? Because it was deemed as a great negotiating tool when you were trying to get a house under contract, because the due diligence fee can be as high as you want it to be, and that doesn't change the price, right? And so this was a great way to let the seller know, hey, I may not be giving you the best price that's out there, but I'm willing to give you a high due diligence fee to let you know that I'm serious about going through with this deal. So I've had many transactions over the years where the highest price didn't always win the deal, because there was a slightly lower price that was offering a higher due diligence, and the seller felt more confident that that buyer is going to stay in the deal, right? Like if two sides, if you have one person that's offering $350 and a $500 due diligence fee, and another person that's offering $340 but a $6,000 due diligence fee, you're going to feel more confident about that person. Like the 350, that could be a pipe dream, right? That could be a person who's just like, I might want to go through with this deal, or I might waste the next month of your time. Some sellers are like, I can't afford to have that time wasted, so I'm going to go with the safer bet and choose that person who had the lower price with the higher due diligence. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. But the leverage that a seller holds is tied a lot to that due diligence fee, because there's so many things in the contract that cannot be enforced across the way, right? So, for example, I've had a lot of deals where a buyer may say up front, hey, we really want to get this house under contract, but we don't want to pay this high price. What do you say we add a feature in the deal where we agree to not ask for any repairs, right? They will say up front, we're going to buy this house as is. We're not going to ask you for any repairs after we get the inspections done. And both sides agree, say, hey, that sounds great. We're good to go. And so we go into contract. They get the inspections done. And then lo and behold, guess what? They end up finding something. They change their mind. They go, oh, well, if I had known that issue was going to be there, I would have never added this as is, right? They come up with all these excuses and they kind of go back on their word. The sellers can look at that due diligence fee as a way to hold them to their word, right? The higher that due diligence fee, the less leverage that buyer has to go back on their word, right? If you got a $5,000 riding on the line, if the seller says, no, you agreed that you weren't going to ask for any repairs, we're not doing anything. If the buyer's only choice at that point is either I back out of the deal and I lose my due diligence fee, or I just go through and follow through with my word like I said I would, right? The higher that due diligence fee is, the more leverage that seller has to make sure that that buyer actually follows through on their word. Because again, there's no way for you to contractually force them to purchase that house or force them to go through with the deal. That due diligence fee is really the seller's most important leverage in that transaction. They can use it to stand firm on the terms that they agreed on, because they know that the buyer loses that risk of walking away. Now, one thing that I always explain to buyers, because usually when buyers hear that, or when I explain that to them, they're like terrified, thinking, "Oh my goodness, like that's too huge of a risk for me to take on, to just have that money just out there at loss if I see something in those reports or in that inspections that I truly don't like, and the seller's refusing to fix it." The buyer also has leverage in this, because we have rules in place in our state which say that sellers are required to disclose, especially agents, I should say, agents are required to disclose material facts about the home. So material facts is kind of an umbrella term. It can mean anything that is of pertinent importance to that potential buyer, right? So it could be a situation where, like, if you know that there's a highway that's going to be built right behind this house in the next few years, that's a material fact. That's something that a buyer would expect to know. If there's issues with the structural integrity of the home, that's a material fact that a buyer would expect to know, that you would need to disclose. Right? If there's anything that's wrong with that house, you would need to disclose that to potential buyers. So when a buyer has an inspection done, a lot of times most sellers haven't done a pre-inspection. And so they are finding out at the same time as the buyer about problems or issues that may be taking place in their home, right? They may not have known that there is a random leak that is happening in their crawl space because they don't go down there, and they didn't realize that until the inspection report came back. They may not have known about that mold that is up in the roof, or because they hadn't gone up in the attic in years, right? They may not, the inspection may uncover all kinds of problems that seller didn't know about. But once that inspection happens, you're kind of opening up at Pandora's box, because now you are releasing or kind of showing up all of these different things that you now know are problems with the home. The seller, after that inspection happens, can no longer claim ignorance, and that agent now has to disclose any of those material facts to any other potential buyers, right? And so let's say, for example, there was a massive damage that was found in the crawl space. There was a whole bunch of standing water and mold, and you got quotes done, and they said, hey, it's going to cost $8,000 to get all this fixed. Right. The seller still has the right to say, I'm not going to fix that. Right. They could say, hey, you spent $5,000 due diligence fee to get this home under contract. We're going to hold you to your word, and we don't think that you are bold enough to say goodbye to that $5,000. So we're not going to agree to fix this crawl space repair. Either deal with it or you can back out of the deal. The buyer has a choice then, right? They can say, hey, I can back out of this deal. But the buyer also knows that if that deal does truly, if they back out, and that deal truly does fall apart, and that seller goes to sell that home again, well, now that seller can no longer claim ignorance about that crawl space repair. They have to share that news with any other potential buyers. And if a potential buyer is looking at a house and they come in and say, hey, just so you know, there's $8,000 worth of crawl space damage that hasn't been corrected or fixed yet. Are you good with buying this house still? They may still be good with buying that house, but I can guarantee you that they're going to want a significant price reduction on that home. Buyers always see an expense as being more repaired than what it as more expensive than what it actually is, right? So, like I said, a $5,000 repair, a buyer in their mind is going to see that as a $10,000 repair. Don't ask me about the psychology behind it. It's just one thing that I've noticed is that buyers always assume that something is going to be far more expensive than what it actually is. And so, if you share that news with other potential buyers, they're always going to see that as a worst case scenario issue. And if they're still willing to go through with the sale of that house, you better believe they're going to want a significant price reduction, and it's likely going to be way lower than what the current buyer has them under contract for. And so the seller, it's usually in the seller's best interest to try and work things out with that buyer. Right now, there are some times that buyers may be unreasonable in what they're requesting, and that's why you want your agent to kind of help you figure that out. But you always want to make sure that they are doing all they can to get things corrected, because that the buyer does still have some leverage in the fact that sellers are required to share that information. They want to make sure that they know that upfront going into that situation. Buyers should also gain leverage if they have clues or ideas of what the seller's motivation is to close, right? If they slipped up and told the buyer that they have to move quickly, or they got a job relocation, or something else, or if they've got like another house waiting on this deal. Any of those clues or ideas or things that the buyer can always use as leverage, right? If you know they have to move out of this house, that's leverage that you can use in the deal and say, hey, do you want to be paying 2 mortgages for the next several months? It took you 90 days to get this under contract. Do you really want to go through? Like, buyers can use that information in their negotiations, right? If they know they're trying to avoid a price reduction or maintain the reputation of that property. All those things are things that you're trying to pay attention to, right? You want to look at how long it's been on the market. You want to look at how many price reductions they've had, how quickly they did those price reductions. All those things are clues, right? If you know that the average house in that neighborhood sells in 30 days and it's been 60 days, you know, okay, they're starting to get a little bit more desperate. And you also know, like, hey, they put the house on the market, and let's say, for example, they did a price reduction 2 weeks after they put it on the market. That's usually a sign that they are motivated to get this house sold, and they're not playing games. They're not trying to intentionally overprice or anything like that, but they're trying to match up with that market, and if there could be other things wrong with it as well. But you want to be looking at all those different clues. Your agent is going to be an awesome resource for you in this aspect, because they usually know the market well, and they know what the telltale signs are that a seller may be more desperate or more willing to work with you and kind of come to terms on a certain thing as well. And so those are always things that you want to be looking at too. One way that a seller can regain some leverage in there as well is if their home offers something that is rare or unique to their property, right? Like if it backs up to a certain area or like a certain spot that is better than what the competition is offering, or if they're at a better price point than what the competition is offering, if they're in a situation where their design is a little bit unique, right, where they might offer something that other houses may not be able to offer. That's another opportunity too, where they can say, hey, yes, a buyer could back out of this deal, but what is the likelihood of them being able to find something similar to this on the market as well. Those are all things that they're going to be that the seller's going to be thinking about as well. And so from a buyer's perspective, you want to take that in consideration too. When you're trying to quote unquote play hardball and leverage with them, you want to understand that there are things that you may not be able to get in the house, right? So like if you're trying to leverage a deal and leverage a negotiation, in your mind, you have to be prepared to say like, hey, if this doesn't work out, am I willing to walk away? If you're willing to walk away from that deal, can you find something similar to what that house offers somewhere else? Right. And so one of the first questions I'm asking when people are kind of getting the home search is, have they found multiple options that offer what they want? Right. That's usually the best situation. The ones that scare me are the ones where it's like, hey, we've been looking at houses online for the past 4 months and we've only found one property that piqued our interest enough to want to move forward on it. That's now there's nothing wrong with that, right? You can absolutely move forward with those kind of stipulations. But once you get that one unicorn of a house under contract, you're going to have a lot less leverage in the deal. The seller may not realize it, but you're going to have a lot less leverage in the deal because you know there's nothing else that's coming up often that gives you what that other house gives you as well. But again, as I said before, leverage is always kind of volleying back and forth between the buyer and seller, and he or she with the most knowledge is always going to be at an advantage in those negotiations, right? And so that's knowledge of the market, that's knowledge of the buyer or the seller's situation, that is knowledge of what that deal or what that house looks like. Every house is different in some capacity, right? And so understanding that as well into the mix. There's always going to be things that are changing in that deal, but you want to have a firm knowledge of it as well. That's another reason, too, why I always tell buyers it's great to spend some time ahead of actually searching for homes. It's great for you to just have time to research and learn more about the area. Right. And so ideally, I love it when people reach out to me so early that they have time to kind of get set up with the home search and not tour houses just yet, but just look. Right. Just look at photos, look for the different things, look in the areas that they like and start to pick up on trends on the houses that you like. Right. If you go into that situation with more knowledge of what is happening in that market. Right. I know houses in this neighborhood sell a little bit faster. I know this house has great opportunities, but they priced it high, and that's why they've been sitting on the market long. It's not necessarily because there's something wrong with that home, right? If you can start to pick up on those patterns ahead of time, when you are ready to start touring homes, you're at a decided advantage compared to all the other buyers that are out there because you have a firm grasp of how the market is looking, what things are happening, what things are taking place. And when you combine that with your realtor's knowledge, well, now you've got a superpower, right? You're at an added advantage to really be able to throw your weight around in those negotiations, throw your leverage around because you have a firm understanding of where things lie and you can understand how to make the decision that's best for you in your situation. So I hope that gives you a little bit more insight into how negotiations can typically go. It's always something that is changing and shifting with the market and with every situation in every house. They're always different. The parties involved are always different. And so it's great to always be learning new ways to kind of work that leverage as well. So I hope that that's helpful for you guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you next week.